I'm Michael Pink. I'm the artistic director for the Milwaukee Ballet. I've been here 20 years, if you can believe it. And here we are restaging the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which we did over a decade ago. For me, it's always interesting to bring this type of work to a new group of people to see what they do with it. And as I always maintain with my work, it's never done. So as I start the process of restaging, I get the opportunity to tweak a little bit. Victor Hugo's novel, which is actually titled Notre Dame, is of course about the cathedral. But the story evolves, and it's incredibly complex as Les Miserables. So that was one of the starting points. It's such an interesting story. So I always wanted to explore how I could push those boundaries of classical vocabulary and yet at the same time create a style of movement that really is the people that I'm working with. With the what we call the corps de ballet, which is our group scenes, our big group scenes, I really wanted to explore that idea of the sort of medieval times where people were fundamentally very ignorant. So there's a lot of a sort of movement that is quite angular and awkward, and it goes one way and the other way, and there's real strong emotions. They're either screaming and shouting, or they're on their knees praying for forgiveness. And the counterpart of that is that when we're in Fleur-de-Lis's house at the beginning of Act 2, it's much more classical in vocabulary. It still has a sense of movement and port de bras that I think would relate to that period, but it's obviously a little bit more elegant. One always needs, as a good actor, you need to be prepared to take risks, calculated risks, and you have to put yourself into a place that perhaps you don't feel quite so comfortable. And I try and incorporate that sense of risk into the movement as well. The story stands up today as well as it did 150 years ago, and that being that it's dealing with these big issues: confusion, abuse of power, domination, temptation, corruption, all of these things that translate, unfortunately, just as well into our current day living. For me, it's the power of the idea of this man who is persecuted because of the way he looks. And because of the fact he can't communicate very well, it's assumed to be somebody who's evil, and yet he turns out to be our hero of the story.
He could be very childlike. He was abandoned as a child and then adopted and brought in by the Archdeacon Frollo, and he is essentially very sheltered, and because of that he's socially childlike, and he eventually becomes the bell ringer of the cathedral. Falls in love with the bells, which eventually cause him to go deaf. So here he is, this deformed, disabled, deaf person who is essentially being locked up in the cathedral.
Frollo is the Archdeacon of Paris and Quasimodo's adoptive father. Frollo is very disgusted with the vulgarity of the people, and so he kind of develops this oppressive presence where he's always looming and watching and judging the people. Frollo throughout the ballet definitely abuses his power. He knows that he's one of the most powerful and listened to and respected people in the community, and because of this leverage that he has as a figure of the church and this huge figure in everyone's lives, he uses it to his advantage. As the story progresses, Esmeralda becomes the manifestation of his shortcomings, because he is very attracted to her and he lusts for her, but as a man of God or someone religious, he views those things as evil.
Esmeralda goes through several experiences. She encounters a priest who is cursing her for being a beautiful woman, basically. And then she gets abducted, and then she gets saved, and then she falls in love, and then her love gets killed or gets stabbed, is taken advantage of sexually and kidnapped, and she definitely pushes back, absolutely. Yeah, you can see it physically. In the choreography, it's very clear that she is not just rolling over, she is fighting for her life. So there's a really beautiful scene in the beginning of Act 3 where Quasimodo realizes that he really loves her.
They form a bond, and she, again, is the only person who he's ever met who has shown him any sort of kindness and tenderness, and he falls in love with her. And the following scene, Frollo comes in and starts to attack her, and she uses the whistle, and he comes in, and when the light of the moon shines on his face, he realizes it's Frollo, the person who has taken him in as a child and raised him. Frollo tells him to leave, and Quasimodo refuses to leave, and a fight scene essentially breaks out.
Coming from his adoptive son, it's one of the most offensive things that he could do. And so this is the culmination of all the rage and the lust that he has for Esmeralda and deciding to just cross the line and not go back.
Quasimodo's trying to keep Esmeralda from Frollo, and he's at the same time trying not to hurt Frollo because he does love Frollo. He's like a father figure to him. And in the end, Quasimodo won't give up in keeping Esmeralda safe.
Emotional response that I have between me and the other individuals is very heavy, especially at the end when it's over and Esmeralda's by herself for the first time. She starts sobbing, and as I'm coming out of character, it's really tough to watch, and you feel that inside. When it comes to the character of Frollo and finding all of those emotions that are within him, which is everything's in turmoil because he's very tortured as an individual. When I'm approaching it, I definitely have to take a minute by myself to kind of find those feelings. And it's different than a lot of other roles I've done. You have to find that kind of dark place to make it read to the audience so that it doesn't seem fake. When I'm done and sit in the dressing room, you kind of feel a little bit heavy as all of those feelings wash out of you. But as an artist, it's challenging but incredibly rewarding. And the process, I think, is enjoyable, and working with these other great artists to make something impactful for audiences.
Another thing that really has been helping a lot to get into character, I'm finding, is my coworkers. I mean, especially in that pas de trois scene that I mentioned, just the look in each other's eyes, you can really feel like that person believes that they are the character who they are playing, and when they're looking at you, they really think they're seeing the character that you're playing, and it's this group effort that it's you can't do it by yourself, and it does bring it to the next level when we're all in the space and have that energy. Ballet is an art form, and we don't use words to tell a story, so if it's just plain steps, the story doesn't come across. It requires a lot of human movement. If Quasimodo wants to touch Esmeralda's hair, how does he face his hand to look like it's more of curiosity than threatening? It definitely requires a lot of physicality. A character like this, he's obviously much different than just playing a prince who falls in love with a swan. Throughout the entire story, he's just being hated on by all of the other characters. To carry that through the whole story, it does take an emotional toll, and it makes you realize that there are really people who are dealing with this in their lives out in the world, and most of us are completely unaware to what they feel like. But becoming a character like this, you embody those emotions and the feelings that they're going through, and it definitely makes you feel some empathy for people of those populations. The rewarding side of it is you really get to dedicate a lot of time and effort to this, and putting the forethought into each and every movement that I have, and the little mannerisms, the gestures and stuff. But on the flip side of it, I'm an able-bodied person who is portraying a person with disabilities, physical impairments, and I can only imagine what that's like.
Yeah, playing Esmeralda has definitely brought more awareness to people in this world who are experiencing these very real issues. Now I'm consciously trying to put myself in their shoes and to think about what would it feel like, if it was happening to me, what would I do? So yeah, getting into character, the music and the choreography really kind of takes you to that place, and especially when you start doing larger chunks of the choreography where you can string these moments together to really find the red line of how am I getting from this moment to that moment. It's a dream role for any artist. It's so full and so rich and so layered, it's almost like more than you can handle, really. It's like there's so much that you could do. We want to try to be as authentic and real as possible in how we decide to like find the little nuances of how do we show this moment. In performance, sometimes we imply something happened. Or just, give a hint to it, but in this production, it's not implied. It's laid out in front of you, and you see it happen. And I think that's important because it just doesn't have the same effect on the audience, on the viewer.
I think one of the most important parts about this ballet and why it's important that we do it is it's, for me personally, the manifestation of humans' capacity for evil. Because there is no monster or creature, there's no Dracula, there's no beast that we kind of pin all of these horrors on as something that's supernatural or fantastical. It's just about humans and what they can do, and especially what they can do wrong.
And we can't just show the happy ending, the good parts. It has to be this dark story that while it's hard to watch and it's difficult to deal with emotionally, it's out there to shine light on it and to show that this is terrible. What's happening to some of these people in the story, and we shouldn't be treating people this way. We shouldn't be acting this way. So it does serve as a reminder.
I think the audience will take away a really inspiring story. I think one that will obviously bring awareness to, these issues that are still prevalent in our world and in our time, and hopefully just be very moved by the story. I mean, it's a beautiful story, and the music just really carries you through. I mean, if you aren't crying by the end, I cry every time I hear the music at the end. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
The book is an epic book, but for those people that have read it, it's a whole different world, etc. Now, I don't expect our audiences to rush out and read the book, but what I would love them to do is come into the theatre, and as many as possible, to support the arts, to support the Milwaukee Ballet, but also to make sure they do not miss this very, very, very important piece of dance drama that was created 25 years ago and is still as relevant and powerful now as it ever was then, and actually when it was originally penned by Victor Hugo in the 1840s.